Free Palestine? Is Israel committing genocide? We're going to talk about all of this and more today so that you can have some clarity on the Israel-Hamas conflict. Well, welcome to the Reconcile podcast. I hope you guys are having a great week. I've been waiting for a while to be able to publish this video. It has taken quite a bit of research. I wanted to be really prepared and study history and facts so that I could bring that to you to empower you, as I always want to do, to have conversations so that we can come to a place of at least some kind of peace on this issue in the United States. If you didn't know, even just a few months ago, there were riots and protests on college campuses where Jewish Americans in our country were having to be evacuated and not get to graduate because of the violence on campus. So I do think it's important that we discuss this, that we have some true understanding of what this all means, what this conflict is about, and a little bit of the history of Israel and Hamas and just the Palestinian people so that we can understand what we're advocating for, because it is dangerous when you combine high emotions with really a lack of understanding of the full situation. So we're going to talk about it today, and I'm just going to start with a few of we're going to cover three. I can't possibly cover all of it. There's just so much history there between these two people groups. So I'm going to cover this as best as I can, hitting the high points and addressing the top three issues that I see from pro-Palestinian protesters. So the three things that we're going to talk about today, these are all arguments and what they're based on from the pro-Palestinian side. So the first one is Free Palestine, which would indicate some kind of dispute over land. The second is Israel committing genocide. And then the third is Israel an apartheid state, which means the word apartheid means separated or set apart. But when people say apartheid state, they're referencing a state that would probably use something like segregation and oppressing one certain class of people. So these are the issues that we're going to cover today. And I'm going to start with just playing a little clip for you of some pro-Palestinian protesters. Okay, so this is what I'm talking about. When we get to a place where we have this high level of emotion and really lack of self-control, I mean, this side just tends to be the side with people that are totally unhinged or that act totally unhinged. And it's honestly extremely naive and ignorant because they don't understand what they're saying. When you support Palestine, in this specific context, in this specific conflict, you are supporting Hamas. I've talked to certain people online that say nobody's supporting Hamas. That's not what we're saying. Of course, we're anti-terrorist. Well, you're not. And I'm going to explain to you why as we get into the details of this. So we're going to start with the argument Free Palestine, which I said earlier would indicate that there's some kind of land dispute. I'm going to start by saying the Palestinian rulers, the authorities of quote unquote Palestine, which we'll talk about in a second, those are terrorist groups. That may not and probably is not what a lot of Muslim people want in that area. I'm sure that they're probably tired of this too. They're being killed. Their rulers do not care about them. So let's be really clear about that. I wanted to point that out. I'm not saying that every Muslim is evil or that they all want this violence or that they all want to kill Jews. But that unfortunately is the ruling class, the authority of that people group and of that area. So those are the ones making the decisions. Those are the ones starting these conflicts, starting these wars. And I'm just going to be very clear with you. There is zero evidence that Hamas or any of these other leaders or terrorist groups care anything about land. They don't care about land. That is not what this war and this conflict is about. Hamas explicitly states, as a terrorist group, that their goal is to destroy Israel, that they do not believe Israel has a right to exist, and they hate them. And that has been the modern history of this area. And so we're going to jump into that a little bit. I'm going to lay some groundwork for you with some history. So if you did not know, Islam was founded in 610 AD, which, just as an aside, this is kind of funny. As I was researching this, I kept seeing CE, and I was like, what does that mean? I've never seen that before. But it is synonymous with AD, and BCE is synonymous with BC. And so but basically all it is that they changed it to be more secular. That's what the AI overview said when I looked it up. And so basically they're just trying to remove Jesus from it and God from history yet again. But it is funny because it still entirely hinges on when Jesus was born and died and resurrected. So I just thought that was funny. If you look me up to fact check me and you see CE, which you probably will, just know that it is interchangeable with AD. So that is this time period that we're in after Christ's death and resurrection, 610 AD. It is the youngest, or one of the youngest, major world religions that exists. Okay? So when we're talking about comparing people groups and who should have the rights to land, this is the timeline here. So they were founded in 610 AD, but Judaism can be tracked back thousands of years to Abraham. That is the difference in the timeline there. So don't you think that we should probably consider the people group that have been there thousands of years longer than the other, that they definitely at least have the right to some of the land? I'm not saying that they should have all of the land, but shouldn't they have a right to some? And you might be thinking, well, yeah, of course they do. That's not what this is about. Well, it is. And Hamas openly admits that. They do not believe that Israel has a right to exist at all. They want to destroy it, and they want to kill Jews. So that's the timeline. So let's also talk about Palestine, because this is really a very ambiguous term. It is an area on a map in the Middle East. That's what Palestine is. There has never been, and there is not, a country called Palestine. And the roots of the word and the name Palestine for that area came from the Romans, who oppressed the Jews. And the Jews, there was a Jewish insurrection. And then after that insurrection, the Romans renamed that area as essentially an insult to the Jewish people. So that's where the name Palestine came from. And that's what you're saying when you say it. So you need to understand what Palestine is, because a lot of these people protesting, not even just in the United States, all over the Western world, they don't know what Palestine is. They can't even point to it on a map. So it's very, it points to a lot of naivete and ignorance, if you want my opinion. But okay, so the size of Israel today, again, this is not about land, but I'm just highlighting a few points for you. The size of Israel today is only slightly bigger than New Jersey, which equates to about 20% of the land in that area. Israel has gone to the table 5 times in the last century, just in the last 100 years, and offered land in exchange for peace. They only occupy 20% of the land in this area, and they have continually given up more and more over the last 100 years, sometimes with the UN at the table, trying to negotiate this, trying to come to a place where there is peace, because every few months they're barraged with bombs from these different people groups. And they've tried. 5 times they've offered land in exchange for peace. They occupy much less land than the quote-unquote Palestinians. But this is the response from one of their leaders at one of the peace negotiations. They said, no peace with Israel, no recognition of Israel, and no negotiations with Israel. So that's how they feel about it. They are not willing to negotiate. If you gave them all the land, it would not stop. They are still going to continue killing Jews. They don't care about land or negotiations or peace. And at one point, the Jews even left Gaza. The Jewish military went in and they removed Jewish settlements in a small portion of Gaza, and they all left. They just handed it over to the Palestinians, and Hamas went in and burned it to the ground in the early 2000s. They don't care about infrastructure or taking care of their people or even actually governing and ruling over their people. And Israel has no interest in ruling those areas either that they've given up. They just want to be left alone and at peace, and to stop having bombs be sent into their most populated area. Okay, so now let's switch gears to the argument that Israel is committing genocide. I have seen so many people that are Christians or self-professing Christians that have said that, oh, all these other Christians that, y'all are justifying genocide if we say something in support of Israel defending themselves. Because let's not forget what started all this. This all started from an unprovoked attack from Hamas, where they paraglided into a music festival and raped and murdered people. This was the third deadliest terrorist attack in modern history, totaling around 1,200 deaths, not to mention that there are people that still have not been recovered that were taken as hostages, and God only knows what those people are living through. So that's what started all of this. And so when people are speaking up saying, no, Israel has a right and a duty to their people to defend their people, we should never want war as Christians. And a lot of times people will use this argument that, you shall not murder as an argument against war. Listen, that's not the same. That's not the same. God also, when he set up Israel, we talk about this a lot, it seems like, but when he set up Israel and the laws for them, the only just punishment for murder was death, which is carried out by the government. So that's the difference. It's not a vengeful murder by just an individual. It's the government was put in place to punish evildoers. And we can see that also in the New Testament, that is the role of the government. So they have a duty to their people to defend their people, to fight back against this terrorist group that came in and senselessly and mindlessly murdered their people. But there's a difference in genocide and a theater of war. Genocide was the Holocaust, and it's really, truly insulting for you to call it genocide. For the mainstream media, honestly, they're more to blame than just individuals that are fed that lie, because that's what people are told. People are told by the mainstream media and propaganda that this is genocide on Israel's part, it's insulting to the history of the Jews. They were mass murdered by Nazi Germany. There were 11 million people murdered in Nazi Germany. That is genocide. A theater of war is not genocide. Now, of course, we can mourn those casualties, and it's terrible that any civilian or that any child would lose their life. But that doesn't mean we pressure the people that are defending themselves to not defend themselves. And so, but let me just also tell you what the Israel government and their military has done to prevent casualties. So let's talk about that for a second. So the IDF, the Israel Defense Force, has also made 79,000 phone calls, and I will link all of this. There will be several links in the description of this video today. The IDF has made 79,000 phone calls, and this was a month or two ago, maybe longer, that I researched this, so I'm sure it's more by now. 79,000 phone calls. They've dropped 7.2 million leaflets and sent 13.7 million texts and 15 million recorded calls to Palestinians in Gaza with evacuation warnings. They've also dropped something called knock bombs that just essentially shake the building. They call the building managers and tell people to get out. If this is genocide, they're very bad at it. This is not genocide. They're warning people to evacuate. And this was what some of the building managers reportedly said when they were called and warned about these bombs coming in. They had said they're not leaving to the IDF, and the IDF would say, well, We know that there are children inside this building. And the response of these building managers, which I'm sure was prompted by Hamas and terrorist groups, is that that would be good propaganda for them, for their own people, their own children to die and be killed in war. That's the level that these people don't care about their own people. And yet we are saying that Israel is committing genocide. This blood is on their own hands. They're being warned to get out of the way. Israel does more than any other country to prevent casualty deaths. They're giving away their position. They tell them the bombs are coming. Who does that? This is the level that Israel cares and tries to prevent casualties. Something else that's interesting and that we should consider is that the numbers of casualties were cut in half. And that was not addressed by the mainstream media. Haven't heard anything about that, have you? Just overnight, they decided to cut the numbers that they reported in half. I wonder why. It's probably because they were getting those numbers directly from Hamas, a terrorist group. Do we not think that they might have a motivation, an ulterior motive to lie about the numbers when this is serving them? They have people all over the Western world standing for them, people that they hate. I see groups that are called Queers for Palestine, and my mind is blown. Do you know what they do to gay people in Palestine? They murder them. They behead them. They torture them. That's what happens there. Like these people hate you. They hate Americans. Their actual religion says to kill anyone that will not convert to their religion, and they've got people all around the globe manipulated into not only supporting them and trying to pressure our government to at the very least take away our support from Israel, if not support them, but also to be violent and hateful to Jews in our own country. That's exactly what they want. They have you exactly where they want you. And we don't even have time to cover the way I honestly, when I read this about the way that America has funded terrorist groups, and even if it's not explicitly that's who we're funding, it is who we're funding. When we send money to these billions of dollars to these other countries in the Middle East, I almost couldn't believe it. And then also in a way I was like, it makes sense at this point. It just makes sense at this point. I can't expect our government to do what's right anymore. It's always so shocking to me. And what people won't talk about is how Trump actually had gotten to a place of peace in the Middle East by defunding these people, which is exactly what should happen. Why are we funding terrorist groups in countries that we've been at war at and that hate us and that hate our values, and actually send people over here to kill our people and commit terrorist acts on our own people? Those are the people that we're funding. And I can't get into all of that, but I will link a video. I'm going to link a video from PragerU, which discusses the 5 specific times that Israel came to the table to discuss peace and to offer land for peace. And I'm also going to post a video of Ben Shapiro, which he talks a little bit more about the funding and the historic deals that Trump brokered between Israel and Sudan. And he also cut off funding of the Iranian regime. Why are we funding them in the first place? It's mind-blowing. But Trump was the only one that had enough sense to just immediately solve this solution by defunding terrorists. That's all it took, was to pull our funding from these people that we were getting nothing in return from, if not evil and just hatred and God knows what else. But he had the common sense to defund these people. And then the second he was out of office, Biden has been trying to backtrack on that. But again, I don't have time to cover all of those details, but please go watch the videos. Look it up for yourself of the amount of money that we've sent to these people. I just saw an article the other day that said specifically not just Iran, but also how we were funding terrorist groups by not, they say, adequately vetting these organizations. But I might be inclined to believe that we knew exactly who they were. And again, I just want to clarify that this is not a call against all Muslim people. I know many of them don't believe in actually executing to the full extent their religious ideals. And I would say to them, maybe you should reconsider. If you're not willing to abide by what your own religious text says to do, says to live out, which I'm going to read a few in a moment, don't you think you should question your entire religion? If you think it's evil and wicked to abide by what your religious text says, don't you think that you might want to go back to the drawing board? I don't know, maybe it's just me. This is, we're quoting out of some of the Quran so that you can see that at the core of this religion is violence and evil. Some examples. Surah, and I'm not sure if I'm saying that correctly, 3:151. We shall cast terror into the hearts of those who disbelieve, all non-Muslims. Surah 2:191. And kill them, non-Muslims, in parentheses, wherever you find them, kill them. Such is the recompense of the disbelievers, non-Muslims. Surah 9:5. Then kill the disbelievers, non-Muslims, wherever you find them, capture them and besiege them, and lie in wait for them in each and every ambush. This is not a peaceful religion. This is not, I don't believe that this will ever be able to create a nation that thrives and succeeds and that can even live in peace with Israel. I believe in freedom of religion, of course, but how can we reconcile this to our nation and our laws that say that it's illegal to commit murder? Their religion says to do it. And I know many people don't actually live by that, but that's what it says to do. And I just don't really understand how we can reconcile those two things. But I'm not, this is not a statement of me saying Muslims can't come into this country. It's not. I'm just highlighting the violence that is at the core of it. And it's just always so strange to me how the left, I know the right. I know the right does things wrong. But again, I will say again, I will stand by this again. These sides are not equally evil. They're not. And the left, by far, is more frequently, more often, on the side of the evildoer. When a woman is raped and she's pregnant, kill the baby. The baby gets the death penalty, not the rapist. Israel's hit with a massive and devastating terrorist attack. They shouldn't protect themselves. Blame them. They need to give up more. They shouldn't exist. A man wants to be a woman. You're bigoted. And you're evil and mean for not wanting them to be in women's spaces, and women should suffer. Women should be in prison cells with a man and be able to be impregnated by a male prison mate. This doesn't make sense. We have to use our brains. We have to use logic. If we don't, real people suffer. The truth is important. And it so often comes back to this stealing of language to manipulate you. We want to redefine everything and make it this flagrant fan to the flame of left idiotic, mindless rantings like Free Palestine that have no basis in reality. This is how they get to change how history is written. By taking language that makes no sense, has no basis in reality, and using it however they will. But by calling this genocide, when Israel does everything in their power to protect people that aren't even their own people, that are hostile against them, that don't believe they have a right to exist. This would be like if we were coming over from Great Britain all over again, and we found the American Indians living here, and you agreed that the American Indians no longer have a right to exist, and you set out to annihilate them, to take all of their land. Now, that issue is much more complex than what I believe, than what I'm saying right now, but I'm giving it to you as an example. That's what you're saying when you are pro-Palestine, which is really pro-Hamas and their agenda. That's the same thing. Why is it that the American Indians, they were from here. They owned this land. They lived on this land for a very long time. But you think it's okay to just come in and take it all and just say, you know what, actually, we don't like those people and they just don't get to exist anymore. They don't get to have their own state anymore. And we actually want to just kill them. And that's what our religion says, so it's fine. No, of course not. This is like supporting Nazi Germany. You guys call this genocide, but it's always the opposite that's true. This is trading the truth of God for a lie. Israel is not committing genocide, but Hamas would like to. If they had free reign, that's exactly what they would do. So this is like you supporting Nazi Germany. Like you guys call Trump Hitler. And it's so ridiculous. It's so upside down. It's so against what is actually true. And it's mind-blowing that people cannot see the truth of that. All right, the last point I wanted to make was the apartheid state. And I do think this is important to cover too, because it shows the heart of Israel. It shows actually who is on the right side, who actually cares about people and creating a peaceful and livable society. So 18% of the population is Muslim in Israel. They have the same freedoms and the same laws as the Jews. They even serve, many of them serve in their military and their government. Saying that Israel is an apartheid state is just totally false, period. We should not be pressuring Israel to stop defending itself from people that want to violently murder their people, send in suicide bombers, send in bombs to their most populated area. You think Hamas cares about civilian casualties? They don't. And we need to start pressuring the Palestinian rulers and authorities to care about their own people, to rule their own people with justice. We need to pressure them to drop their weapons, to start actually caring about their own people and to rule them and to set up an organization, an actual infrastructure for their people to live and to stop the madness, to stop the bombing of people that Israel that just wants to be left alone in peace. But they're not going to. And that's why we have to defund them. We have to pressure them and not Israel. And we need to support and stand with Israel. Be on the side of reality and truth. You can look all of these things up on your own. You can fact check me. I will put the links in the description of this video. Please actually understand what you are protesting and how you are on the side of terrorists right now if you're pro-Palestine. I'm not saying that Israel can never be criticized, but I'd say it's pretty hard to do when you know all that they're doing to try to prevent their own technically enemies' deaths. They are civilians and women and children are not their enemy, but you get what I'm saying. Like this is their enemy that they're at war against. They don't know who's who or who's where necessarily, but they're sending in warnings to those people to help them. So that really displays the heart of Israel and the very high level of care that they put on civilian lives. That's all we have time for today. I hope this was encouraging and informative to you, and I'll see you next time.